So last video I did a video about bet sizing and how much EV adding certain bet sizes add to the overall EV. In this video I basically concluded that on the turn with the sim that I did, which is a short stacked raised pot heads up, you mainly want to bet half pot and pot. Those are the real high EV sizes, which I got from looking at a couple of flows, and I noticed that there is a way easier way to do this in GTO Plus, and I should have done it like that. So let's look at this in a little bit more detailed way, because what you can do is, if you, let's say, have the flop king queen deuce, you can go to check check, and then you, instead of like always choosing the deuce of hearts here, you can click on turn report, and there you can see how much on each different card GTO wants to bet and how much for what sizing. And you can also see the aggregate here at the bottom, and you will see that the 10 sizing is actually on this specific board, an example, chosen the most, and that's the case for a lot of flops, I would say. If I look now through them, and mainly you want to check most of the board that are bet highly on the flop from imposition. If they check behind, you mostly want to check. But if you bet something, you probably want to bet it small. That's the most chosen option, at least. You can see that on almost all of the cards here it checks. Like, this is a way better way to see what the turn frequency of certain bet sizes is. We can look through some other boards now, because we started this on this flop. So I'm gonna go through all of the flops now and show you the turn report for all of the flops. Again, we have the 25 flops here, and then you can have a better impression on what bet sizing is chosen most often and so on. And I want to show you the function in itself. So king 3, 3, mostly check and mostly small if so. 7, 7, 6. This is a little bit more interesting. The most chosen option on average here is 36.7. Last time I chose the deuce, which is the one card where out of position bets pot, deuce of hearts. Now you can clearly see that on the other cards it doesn't choose pot. And it really depends on which card comes on the turn. If you want to bet it at all, if you want to bet it most of the time, and what sizing you use. I mean, this is obviously, but on average, even though I said last time the pot sizing is used here mostly, on average the half pot sizing is actually used on this flop. And that's because you have like the 10, the 9, the 8, the 5, the 4, where you actually have high equity, relatively high equity, and want to bet this if you're medium strength hand more often. And then on the high equity cards of the ace, the king, you mainly don't want to bet this. And if you bet it, you probably bet it small. You can also do this for the river report, by the way. So this is a check down pot now. Takes some time to resolve. Actually takes a lot of the time. It's like maybe you actually, okay, you actually need to click it after a while in order for it to stop. That's good to know. So the river on the deuce turn, that is, the overbet is used most, and then a small board, a small half pot bet. But also depending on which cards, like there is quite a bit of the 10 sizing in there. But on the ace and the king, you mostly check. Let's go through the turn spots. Here it's half pot and quarter pot again. Checking again on the ace, the higher cards, and on the lower cards you sometimes have the bigger bet, more often bet also. This is, by the way, an ace-high flop now. This gets checked 1.6.9% on the flop, so barely not. But last time we had the error where it was not checked at all, and then it showed some weird like bet it all or out of position. That was obviously wrong. If an ace-high flop gets checked behind, very rarely, you should mostly check and then bet small, if not most of the time. So we can basically ignore those high options. 8-4 deuce, that is a flop that is checked back 63% of the time. And this does get bet, like the 7, 6, and 5 turn especially gets bet a lot. As you can see in the equity graph, like the 7, the 6, you actually have like over 50% equity with your range. And that leads to betting a lot. and betting it for half pot. That's bigger, sometimes pot. You can also look for like dominated sizings, like sizings that are rarely or never chosen. Like the 3/4 is still like pretty surely not chosen that often. Here there's some portion on the 10, although this is even not even on those. So it's you basically don't see this being chosen all that often, 1.95%. Yeah, so on this board basically you have a variety of sizing that is getting used, mostly the half pot though. That's because of the 7, 6, and 5 turns, and then on the other turns you mostly use the small sizing, some half pots in there, and then on the real low stuff, which pairs the cards on the flop, then you use the overbet, or not the overbet, but the big bet pot. And since the deuce of hearts was what I was showing last time, that's where the pot sizing comes in. Queen 5 deuce, half pot or small. Seems like a good mix of things. Again, checking the ace and the king, but actually not using 40 and 30 here. Queen 6 deuce seems very similar. It was a very similar betting result as well. King 9 deuce, which is almost never checked, so let's ignore that actually. 8 5 3, which is highly checked. And you see half pots here also most often. On the turns that you want to bet, the 7 and the 6, most of the time, you use the half pot sizing mostly with some overbets. And then there's like the 4 and the 3 and the deuce. On these cards you want to also use the pot sizing. But it's like way easier to see it like that than what I did before. Jack 10 3 gets checked back 20% of the time, mostly green stuff here, and then if not, variety of mix stuff is. Jack 6 4 checked back quite a bit and gets bet the half pot sizing and the quarter sizing. And you can see maybe a pattern that flops that get checked back often, or out of position has a lot of equity on the flop on those where in position checks back a lot, right? So those get then also bet more often, and then roughly the half pot sizing is bet more often. So on most boards that actually get checked back in the occasion where it does get checked back, then maybe half pot is the better option here, because there's no use if like pot shows up a lot on the boards where in position checks back 5% of the time if those never happen to be checked back. And even if you then have a lot of boards that pot is the correct sizing most of the time, if the few boards that do get checked back have a half pot at the sizing, obviously you rather want to use those in those situations that it does get checked back. Obviously you also have to realize which boards should get checked back often and which not. 10 9 4, again half pot, check back 40% of the time. Jack 10 4, similar to the Jack 10 3, I would say. Half pot small. This is a board where it rarely gets checked back. As you can see, like if it rarely gets checked back, out of position checks a ton and bets small if not. This is a board that gets checked back 56% of the time. And here half pot is again the main option, especially on those boards that then you want to bet, like not the ace, the king, the queen, maybe the jack. And on the other boards you want to bet, and you want to bet a lot of half pot and maybe small. But I think you can't go too wrong with just betting half pot. The sizing on those highly checked back boards that have a favorable turn to you, say. Like one of those green ones here, 9 8 5 4 3 deuce. 6 is not so favorable, I guess, because he does check back the 6, and then the overcards get checked back, especially the ace. So the 9 7 5 flush draw flop, that gets checked back 65% of the time. What happens here? Again, half pot is the size to go. Some smaller, very rarely larger. And again, checking the ace, king, queen boards. Like again, the deuce that I always chose last time is one of the few only cards that does get back big. And that's like the blank cards pretty much. On blank cards, I feel like you oftentimes go for big bets. King 9 5, never check back. A lot of checks, small bets. And 8 7, the highest check flop so far, 72%, and does get bet half pot, small, definitely a theme here. Maybe there's even a size, if you just want to bet one size that is between half pot and quarter pot somewhere, like 1/3, 40%. Yeah, so that is a really cool feature that I somewhat knew that existed but forgot in the last video. Definitely you should do it like that and not like it did last time. Also, we now have, me as well, have now a very much clearer picture on bet sizing on the turn in those situations than it was last time presented. The last video was mostly about the EV difference, that the EV difference on having only one sizing compared to having many sizings as an option does make. You can check it out here.